Greetings. Continuing. The next question. What about academic philosophy? And what is epistemology? And what might these have to do with material like this? Personal evolution training, as you are laying it out. Answer. Academic philosophy is perhaps the only academic field of pursuit of which is not purely consciousness hijacking, here's what to think, left brain paradigm indoctrination. Well, at least it's not purely a matter of here's what to think. Anyway, there is a significant amount of here's how to think involved in the academic field of philosophy. When I was at the University of California at Berkeley, getting my degree in philosophy, I got sick of it rather quickly. Academic philosophy, that is. It was far more left brain than I had anticipated, even though there was a strong element of here's how to think. Until I got the hang of it, I did a lot of things to distract me from my disdain. This following story tells of one such distracting activity. I had a professor. As I recall, he had spent some time working at Princeton as well. I took him for philosophical logic as well as for philosophy of language. Now, one thing he taught us in philosophical logic was how to generate formal languages. And in the study of that, well, we had a lot of reading to do, and one of the bits of reading that he had us do was his book called Descriptions. And the main focus of Descriptions was the word the. His entire monogram or book was an analysis of the word the, and yes, you guessed it already. Whether the word the functions as a description or as a name. Whether it functions to describe or to name. You're right. Well, at that time, at that point, it was all just a little bit more anal retentive and left brain about all of this, even though there was a strong element of how to think involved. Right? And I'm going to make a point about that here in a bit, with respect to your question. This all has to do with your question. Now, even so, it was very, very left brain. Okay? I amused myself during that semester by writing a detailed double entendre about the ancient Athenians' social practices of sodomizing male youth while introducing them to philosophy. In my writing about this, my just side distraction for myself, I used words like analysis and fallacies, analyses and fallacies. Analysis and fallacies, that's it. I use these words humorously, in my opinion. And I said that this whole thing they were doing back then boiled it down to a philosophanatomical, kind of like, a philosophical anatomical, a philosophanatomical confusion. Insofar as the men, they thought that they were pumping wisdom into the young boys' brains by way of their intestines. Whereas in reality, it wasn't wisdom that they were pumping. No, rather it was jisdom, or just jism, a mistake that was just dumb. Well, I had this paper I had written about this, this is just like one page. With me, I was sitting in a coffee shop, and in came this professor, Mr. Princeton. And he sat down at a different table, and I went and I joined him. He was by himself. I excused myself from the person that I was sitting with, and I got out my paper, and I went and I joined Professor Princeton. The man. I shared my written tale with him, and when I had finished, he just looked at me kind of oddly. And he left the coffee shop. I guess he wasn't amused. And after that day, he seemed to have a little trouble looking at me, eye to eye in the class. Nevertheless, I did well in both of his courses. Now, my point in bringing that up was, if you would be going into an academic philosophy program, field of study in a university of any decent repute at all, and you're expecting to find this kind of material, over there, you might end up doing some writing of, who knows, equally bizarre or other creative things as distractions to take your mind off the disdain. Just maybe. I don't know. Right. Now, you asked something a little bit more specific. You asked me for a description of epistemology. Now, that's a very good question. If you're thinking that perhaps the academic field of study that is called philosophy, right, has anything to do with this kind of material we're talking about, personal evolution, self-mastery, an occult side of it, a more what some might call a philosophical side of it that has practical application, tied right in, pragmatism, bona fide pragmatism. Well, then you might also be thinking, and I can understand this, that epistemology might be the area of philosophy that has most to do with it. Well, okay, I'll answer your question. In my own words, epistemology is the branch of philosophy involved with, or also known as, knowledge theory. Its object of investigation is knowledge. Whereas metaphysics seeks to answer the question, what is the nature of reality? And ethics seeks to answer the question, what is the nature of right action? Epistemology seeks to answer the question, what is the nature and scope of knowledge? Relevant epistemological questions are, what are the necessary and sufficient conditions for knowledge? How can we know that we know? Can we know what knowledge is? What constitutes justified belief? To demonstrate epistemology in action, please try to follow this. A typical epistemological analysis, which looks like the following. Will look like the following. Please just easily here. No strain. This is not important. I'm just trying to answer the question. Just listen, that's all. A typical epistemological analysis looks like the following. Quote, John knows P. Just listen. John knows P, end quote, is true if and only if 1, 2, 3, to the n. I will explain. If and only if means if x then y, and if y then x. And such that in this immediately previously stated analysis, x equals John knows P is true. And y equals the 1, 2, 3, to the n. P is a proposition, maybe something about the external world, or about John, or about the content of some other person's mind, and so on. And the 1, 2, 3 to the n are conditions to be identified that would make the entire proposition obtain. The entire proposition, John knows P, up to the n. Obtain. Now, there you go. There's a typical epistemological analysis of something. As you may see, epistemology gets mind-warpingly complicated very quickly and is hardcore left brain stuff. Now, to help delineate epistemology from another branch of philosophy, here is an example that's much easier to follow. An example of a famous epistemological statement that has often been misconstrued as being a metaphysical one. So this will help to delineate epistemology from another branch of philosophy, metaphysics. Just to help define epistemology here. This is an epistemological statement that has often been misconstrued as a metaphysical one. René Descartes' cogito ergo sum, which is Latin for I think, therefore I am. While some people think that he means I exist because I think, which is a metaphysical proposition, this is not what he's saying, it's not what he means. He is not making a metaphysical proposition. He means, I know that I exist because I am thinking, which is an epistemological proposition. No matter how we might twist things around, his proposition has to do with what he knows, rather than with what is. It's an epistemological statement. I think, therefore I am. Depending upon context, the adjective epistemic may be substituted for the adjective epistemological. Now, from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, we have a similar definition. Defined narrowly, epistemology is the study of knowledge and justified belief. As the study of knowledge, epistemology is concerned with the following questions. What are the necessary and sufficient conditions of knowledge? What are its sources? What is its structure? What are its limits? As the study of justified belief, epistemology aims to answer questions like, how are we to understand the concept of justification? What makes justified beliefs justified? Is justification internal or external to one's own mind? And understood more broadly, epistemology is about issues having to do with the creation and dissemination of knowledge in particular areas of inquiry. And thirdly, here from Wikipedia, the word epistemology comes from the Greek word episteme, meaning knowledge and understanding, and also from the word logos, meaning the study of. It is a term first used by a Scottish philosopher, James Ferrier, to describe the branch of philosophy concerned with the nature and scope of knowledge, and is also referred to as theory of knowledge or knowledge theory. And to put more concisely, it is the study of knowledge and justified belief. It questions what knowledge is and how it can be acquired, and the extent to which knowledge pertinent to any given subject or entity can be acquired. Much of the debate in this field has focused on the philosophical analysis of the nature of knowledge and how it relates to connected notions such as truth, belief, and justification. Now, I suspect that you asked me these questions because you wanted to determine whether academic philosophy has anything to do with self-mastery, personal involvement, and true selfhood as we deal with them here. As you might now be able to determine, it does not. Well, if at all, it doesn't have much to do with it. If it does to any extent, it would largely lie in an esoteric, not exoteric, understanding of the ancient Greeks, or any more modern approach to philosophy called pragmatism, such as presented by William James. But pragmatism, even though a more modern approach, isn't a popular one in academic circles today. Other than that, you would have to turn to Oriental philosophy, really, particularly that of South Asia or India. Existentialism is not current day philosophy. It is back in history a little bit, and it doesn't either. And existentialism is a proposed answer to nihilism, which, by the way, didn't deserve an answer. And existentialism is a little better. Anyway, so, no. And if we do turn to Indian philosophy, even then, the academic study of such philosophy usually robs it of its true capacity to instrument one's actual personal development. And finally here, I can now swing back to what I said in the beginning. Academic philosophy does teach you how to think, more than does any other academic field. An appropriate application of that attribute of it does serve instrumentally in the direction of self-mastery due to its own merits, just learning how to think. Now, the next question is, what about obstacles in life? What about just obstacles? Not exactly what do they have to do with self-mastery training, personal involvement training. But just, can you say something about obstacles? Such as, for example, a criminal record. And we'll take up with that in the next video. Have a good day.